Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have Blackheart, an obscure arcade shoot 'em up. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer UPL, Blackheart released to arcades in 1991. So this is yet another UPL title that is fairly obscure and one that I was not familiar with until it was announced as an arcade archive. At this point, Hamster has ported several of the UPL shoot 'em ups to their arcade archive collection, and as far as this one's concerned, it's got to be one of my least favorite of all the ones that they've done. I do not enjoy this title at all, and it's not really one that I can recommend. It does have some interesting mechanics, however, so let's dive into the game and you can make your own opinion of it based off of what you see. So placing credits into the machine, we're taken to this rather interesting screen here, and this is kind of one of the problems I have with the game. So you can see the artwork is actually quite detailed and gives this rather kind of like gothic fantasy appearance to it. We'll put a few credits into the machine to get started with, and then this opening scene here is another example of some really awesome and interesting art. So we play this character Zeal, who's summoning this dragon so we can ride off to save this girl here, Jean. Now that we've got those awesome cutscenes out of the way, this is the art in the game. And initially, this is why I was interested in checking out this title. The screenshots for it looked so bizarrely funny. I was like thinking, is this some sort of fantasy shoot 'em up, kind of in the vein of Cotton or something like that? But the cutscenes paint a different picture. So you've got these really serious cutscenes, and then you've got these like silly sprites, and it's hard to understand if the game wants to be taken seriously or not. Anyway, as far as gameplay is concerned, this is a very standard horizontal scrolling shoot 'em up. We are playing on the English version of the ROMs provided on the arcade archive, and that's actually important to note as there are several key differences, and I'll get into those in a little bit. Anyway, we do have two attacks on our dragon, although initially we just have our main shot, which on the included documentation, which is in the manual, is just referred to as E-Fire. A little bit confusing. There's also an F-Breath, which we need energy for, and we get those by picking up those blue pixies. There are two other pickups in the game, those being the red fairies, which act as our options. You can equip up to 3, and then certain enemies, when they're destroyed, will also drop coins. So this is our first boss, and he goes down really, really easy, especially on the English version of the game. And that's definitely important to go and note that distinction. So, with the first stage down, we'll start showing this game off in co-op. This game does support 2 players, but keep in mind the second player will add a little bit of slowdown to the gameplay, although in certain sections, like this stage in particular, where there's a lot of environmental elements that we need to destroy, the extra firepower is definitely welcome. Anyway, so as far as what's kind of weird about this game, so we've got this huge sprite that the characters that we are playing as. And one thing that's interesting is the hitbox is actually really minimal and kind of oddly placed. In the manual for the game, there is a really handy visual, like this one here, that shows you where that hitbox is. So it's important to commit that to memory. One thing that I will say is the animation on the dragon is really neat. So I was mentioning that there are some key differences between the Japanese and the English release of the title. So that the biggest difference, the one that makes a huge impact, is hitboxes. So in the English version, the dragon's hitbox, or basically the area below your actual hitbox, is invulnerable. Enemy bullets will be canceled out if they hit from the bottom, so you kind of want to dodge low to basically increase your chances for surviving this game, which is kind of interesting. The other two main differences that exist between the English version and the Japanese version: the English version has rapid fire as your default, whereas the Japanese one, you're firing at a much slower pace if you just hold the button down. And I thought that was a rather interesting change that they made. The other big one, so you see that as our shots hit both the enemy and walls, it's exploding into this red fire pattern, which happens to be the same red that you see if you use your fire breath. I accidentally ran into the wall. There's actually something quite easy to do. In the Japanese version, our shots, when they impact enemies and walls, it's more of this brown effect. So there's certain sections where I feel like the Japanese is better that way, whereas others I feel like the English is better. I think it was done to obscure, to prevent the obscuring of enemy shots, as certain enemy shots, these boomerangs in particular, are the same color of that explosion that I was mentioning. One fun thing that is fun is when you destroy bosses, they explode into coins, something kind of similar to like Scott Pilgrim. So that stage 3 scene there with our heroine being held by the throat by the villain is going to be the last cutscene, or the last animated, or drawn cutscene rather, that we see until the end of the game. Every other stage from here, so stages 3 through 8, have the same starting screen. It's something that's kind of a little on the ridiculous side, to be honest. And that's basically what we have here as far as Blackheart is concerned. So the game itself might have come across as a decent shoot 'em up, save for some really big drawbacks. So let's go ahead and dive into my minus flavors, and I can start going over what I don't like about the title, which unfortunately is quite a bit. So the first couple stages aren't too bad on this category, but from stage 3 on, things start to get really busy with a lot of enemies on screen, a lot of shots, and we have a very large sprite, even if our hitbox isn't that large. So it's easy to lose yourself, and more specifically, it's really easy to lose enemy shots in the surrounding chaos that is this game. In addition to that, there's some really obnoxious design, like this whole section here, where we've got spikes that are just falling from the sky, seemingly at random. So if you've played the game multiple times, you'll know where those are at, but it's still not good design. There are also plenty of sections where enemies come from above, which is our weak point, especially if you're used to using the dragon for defense, or from behind. An area that's very difficult for us to hit, as we don't have any attacks which can easily target behind that, unless we have a full set of fairies, in which case we'll have that one fairy behind that can act as an option to defend our 6. In addition to that, there's some really bizarre sound design, where some stages, I can't even really call it music, it just is this repeating noise which gets really, really grating to listen to. So this boss here, stage 3's boss, actually does an excellent job of highlighting one of the problems I have with losing the enemy shots in our own. So if we're using our fire attack, it's very, very easy to obscure the shots that he happens to fire our way, and the amount of times that you're going to die from those kind of sneak attack shots that are just hidden by your own is too frequent. And then the last big minus flavor that I have for it is the story. So without going into much spoilers, I'm not a fan of the way that the game ends, and it's more because it's can I go and make any changes to the game ending, or is this the way that it's going to be no matter what? And so that was kind of frustrating, so much so that when you finish the game, you start a second loop. Thinking that might possibly have like changed the ending, I played all the way through a rather frustrating second loop, and that's definitely colored my game to the point where it's like, honestly, I never want to pick this one up again. That aside, there are a couple plus flavors I can say. So whether intentional or not, some of the sprites just strike me as like so silly and cute that was what initially drew me to the title, and I still find that to be something that I like the little fairies that are almost like cherubs around us. Some of the enemy mages, it's kind of like, really? These guys are our enemies? Then you also have some that are more demonic, like these like crazy flies. And so just the sprite work is wonderful. And then there is the, like, I don't feel that it's used as well as it could be, but the overseas version, using the dragon's invulnerability for like a defensive gameplay, I think is a really neat way to kind of like design and play your game. I just kind of wish that the rest of the gameplay was as enjoyable, and maybe I've done some of that to myself, but that is what it is. Alright, well, there you have it. Blackheart served up for your enjoyment. Definitely not one that I can recommend, but it was still an interesting one for myself to check out, as I thought it was, well, an interesting chapter in UPL's history. Well, that'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. I want to thank you so much for joining us this week. I hope you have a wonderful week next week, and we'll see you next time.